My name is Jason J. Rock Houston, and this is Guitarist TV. We're talking with guitarist Jeremy Edge from a Jeremy Edge project. And Jeremy, you're, of course, the front man, the face of the band, the guitar player. Um, and the latest album is kind of a two-volume set. I mean, people can, I guess, buy it to individually or to did a package yet? Or want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we actually kind of produced this as a double album, and we knew that we were going to separate it digitally because digital streaming likes things in singles, not in big double albums like presentations. But this one, we did manufacture two separate LPs for this one. We were originally going to have them go into the same sleeve, but if you know anything about vinyl, the production backlog sometimes 9 months to a year. And by going this route, we were able to get our hands on vinyl within just a few months. So
that's pretty nice, and it is old school. I mean, it kind of reminds me when Guns N' Roses put out, their double album, the Use Your Illusion set, and
yeah,
they had where people could buy separately. And you think about from a marketing standpoint, it makes a lot of sense because people may or may not be able to buy both volumes right away. You can buy one and then go buy the other. You can buy both, whatever you're able to afford.
not to mention the whole digesting things, a little at a time.
Yeah.
When the CD first came, like a big medium, everybody's like, oh, we can pile 15, 16, 17 songs on CD.
Yeah.
And then you got like some people said, well, I never really listened to the last half of the CD.
Yeah.
So,
And so when you were first listening back to the CD, what was that process like for you? I mean, as far as was it hard to decide which songs would go on which CD or which songs would fit better with which songs?
I mean, it was, but in a way, I kind of had a vision for that to be laid out because even if somebody's listening to it digitally, I wanted, you feel like there's a certain type of song that goes first track side A, and you have a certain type of song that ends the side before you flip it,
Sure.
and you kind of want
progression. It seems like when listening to the CD, and the other thing, like when each one of your releases, there seems to be a definite progression. What I mean is, like we talked last time, for example, on the first Jeremy Edge album, it's kind of the combination of like rock. It's a little bit of rockabilly, rock and blues. And then this one, I mean, I really feel like there's like you got the rock thing going definitely, but there's a little more of a swampy blues. I hear some R&B in some of the stuff. I mean, I wrote some of the stuff down like last night, just listening to some of the songs, like Better Way, which is from Volume One. That kind of has an old swampy blues feel to me.
Yeah, it's definitely a blues feel. I kind of pictured that of being like the Buddy Miles, Jimi Hendrix era, or even that's a big influence of mine is this Buddy Miles and the Buddy Miles Express, and that
Yeah.
to me very influenced by things like Buddy Miles and Sly and the Family Stone and Billy Preston and
Oh yeah. And then another song I dug was "Slow Breeze." To me, that's the one that's kind of got a bit of an R&B feel to it.
yeah, those some of my favorite singers are the old soul singers and R&B singers, so I have tons of that stuff that I've listened to and exposed myself to, over and over. So it's kind of like a little bit of that soul feel, but a little Zeppelin-esque, I guess you could say, in a way too.
And I think anybody that's a fan of anything you've done, like even Candlelight Red, that's a lot more closer, I'd say, to I wouldn't call it metal, but a lot closer to hard rock, and
Yeah,
a lot more metal oriented. But so doing the Jeremy Edge project, I mean, again, I think anybody that's a fan of anything you've done is going to dig this, but it's quite different. I mean, like when you're writing songs like this, you feel that you really have to get into that blues groove.
well, actually, I mean, it's natural for this. To me, it's kind of like I can write whatever comes in my head. And when you're working with a team of musicians and you have guys that agree, well, our band is a definite this, then I might pull different influences, like
I guess a better question maybe would be since you've been doing like hard rock and metal all these years. I mean, when you started the Jeremy Edge project, was this just a natural progression for you, or
I mean, it was kind of like a return because I grew up with, my father was a
yeah,
musician, my sisters were into music. And I grew up listening to all this stuff, playing it. And as I kind of started to get out and gig and leave home and end up 500 miles away trying to audition for some band or whatever, you end up playing all kinds of music, and I like all of it, but this is kind of more like coming home to me.
oh,
Whereas
sure, sure. I mean,
like the metal stuff, a lot of metal I don't like, but I have my players that I really loved, like Adam Jones from Tool, and there's a song on the new Candlelight Red EP that I feel like I really channeled the band at the drive-in. I
yeah.
really like that. I'm just very, very particular about the hard rock stuff, but there's almost every genre of music. There's some stuff I like from each bit of it.
Yeah, and I think with that, it also shows that your level as a musicianship. I mean, some guys are really great at at one thing, but if you can do like what you're doing with the Jeremy Edge project, then you can go and do a Candlelight Red record, and it's more metal oriented. That shows your ability to kind of branch out and do more than just one thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's always kind of been my goal, is to not have any musical limitations.
Boundaries, yeah, your limitations, exactly. And probably my favorite song so far off of Volume One would be "No Way Home." To me, real rock and vibe. It's kind of a little more radio um, friendly. I think there's real potential for that to be a hit at radio. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a song that I think is pretty cool. It's almost got like a little bit of a southern groove to it. Almost,
yeah,
one of my friends said it reminded them like of something off Robin Trower's "Victim of the Fury" record. You could hear it on that.
yeah. There you go. And then "Bad Times." That's another one I like. That's kind of in just a word to me, epic. It's an epic track. I don't really know how else to describe it. I just listened to that, and it sounds kind of really, really big.
Yeah, I think I was trying to pull back into that, like at least the music, not the vocals, but the music is kind of inspired by that whole Dio Sabbath era. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
things like Children of the Sea and stuff like that. That's kind of that big slow groove type thing.
Yeah. And another song that really stands out to me is Liberation Song. And to me, I listen to that. I don't know what it is, but I call that song like the sound of freedom. I mean,
Yeah. That was, one of my big influences too, is I love Bob Marley.
yeah,
And that is almost like a combination of like Marley meets Pink Floyd meets a little bit of Black Sabbath, and
yeah.
it's kind of sort of I kind of picture like what would Bob sing about today, and I think the basically the song is kind of singing about how the world is kind of very divided when we should all really be united. There's a lot of
That's an interesting thing in listening to some of your songs on this latest release is that you stop and think about how divided the world is kind of currently as we sit here and speak. Music has a real power to oftentimes bring people together. And while some of these songs you've written here may be about kind of the current state of the world, um, at least when I listen to these songs, I'm not brought down or anything, but if anything, it's kind of it's just kind of taking an honest look at the world, and they're not necessarily bring me down songs. They're just kind of saying this is kind of your view of the world, I guess, and you just got such a gift for writing the way you do.
Well, some of the stuff you obviously was written during the pandemic, so you had a lot of time to sit and think about these things. But I'm a big fan of, like the soul era of music, people like Sam Cooke. These were people that really brought people together, music. Bob Marley would be one of those people. And what I see happening in the world today, that the world is kind of in a very tried state, and what happens is you see musicians kind of get kind of political,
Yeah,
and they kind of get a very team oriented and very finger pointing.
yeah.
I feel, I mean, I respect their decision to do that, but I feel as a musician, my role is to try to, there's enough of that stuff to try to kind of get people on opposite teams.
Yeah, yeah,
And how do you get people to find commonality? How do you get people to come together? And historically, musicians have played a huge role in that.
yeah.
And
I mean, that's what's missing in the world today. I mean, I miss the days of being able to have and there's really no reason you can't have a discussion with somebody. Like, I'm sitting here talking to you, I don't even know what your politics is. I don't really care because, we're talking about music, and music
yes,
should be one. I mean, and you have a right to believe whatever you believe, but um, I'm of the thought that if we were, let's say, different politics, different mind, I'm not the type of person to think, oh well, he doesn't agree with me, so he's a bad person. I think there's too much of that. You got to be willing to, like you say, find common ground.
yeah, I feel like I always liked that whole of concepts of when I describe people would describe government of a good government should be a strong team of rivals,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
can maybe
yeah,
debate fiercely in the daytime, but at the bar later they're having a couple pints of brandy and
yeah,
having a good laugh. and
yeah, yeah.
and I think and I think we've lost that, and I think those people, back then who had that team of rival mentality were able to solve a lot of problems and
Yeah.
find a
Yeah.
lot of things where the sum of the parts was greater, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts.
It's become like team sports. I mean, and you take a lot of these celebrities, like you said. I mean, one of my favorite bands growing up was Twisted Sister, and the lead singer Dee Snider. He was one of these guys that was like totally anti-establishment, and putting his middle finger up in there. We're not going to take it. I want to rock. And I remember seeing him on TV at those Senate hearings when they were trying to sticker all the records in, and they were so surprised that this long-haired rocker dude was actually, educated person. And
Absolutely.
and it's kind of sad to see what he's become, because like these days he's going online, shaming people for not wearing a mask and that. And I'm like, why don't okay, you believe whatever you do, but again, I don't think you have to shame people into doing things your way. That's just my opinion.
Or they shouldn't shame people for wanting to do that, because I've met people who are like really terrified, who had maybe a relative who's very sick,
Yeah, yeah,
oh, and it's almost the one thing. It's like if you've come to the conclusion that it's placebo, then maybe you give them some break, just so that they feel
yeah.
better. We lose our humanity. But I mean, I do agree. A lot of the artists that used to kind of be
I mean,
like,
a perfect example. I remember when the singer Meatloaf died, about a year and a half ago from COVID, and I could not believe, a lot of these news reporters are actually going on TV saying, well, he deserved it. He deserved to get it and all that. He deserved to get sick because he didn't wear a mask. And I don't personally think anybody deserves to die. That's just me.
absolutely. Or you might get some people who are saying, well, so and so died of a vaccine injury. Well,
Yeah,
I had to warn them. Well, it's at the end of the day, people are just kind of making decisions to try to go about life the best they can. You're dealing with uncharted territory, so people are going to deal with what they can. I do agree, though. I mean, it has got to the point where a lot of the artists that used to kind of be like, screw you,
yeah,
you
yeah.
won't do it, you won't tell me what to do, or kind of like, you better to do what they tell you.
It's kind of like
And,
take a guy like you take a
that's
guy
kind
like
of
Dee Snider,
um,
and he wants to be in the crowd of the very people that are trying to get his records banned. That's just
yeah.
all these
But
years. Yeah,
I think that when you have an eagle's eye view of things, I mean, our
yeah,
views of things might change a lot. So
yeah.
it's kind of like I don't hold anybody responsible for anything that turns out to be a bad view, because we're all experiencing this for the
Oh,
first
like
time.
yeah, you're right. Everybody has a right to their
I mean,
opinion. I guess what I'm saying is,
on things for decades back where I flip flopped it a couple times because I kept getting another bird's eye view of it.
sure,
So,
sure.
and
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not fool enough to believe that, well, my view is the only view, and
yeah,
I know everything, and so that's just me personally. But getting back to music, I do think that's why we need a release like this latest release you put, which is called Saints and Souls Volume One and Volume Two. I mean, you give the fans with a double album like that, you've given us ton of music to check out, and this kind of again the current state of the world, and so kind of you put these two albums on. Volume One and Volume Two, it kind of makes people maybe hopefully forget about their problems, whatever they're personally going through, and just kind of get down to some nice rock and blues.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of, we might be going through some dark times, but we'll get through it together, and this is how we'll do it.
And have you done any live shows yet since the album has been out?
Um, I've done well, we did this in two sections. So, I played New Year's Eve, I played a show around the holidays with Gary Hoey,
Oh,
and we took a few months off, and we're about to start playing again. So,
let me ask you, Jeremy. You just as you just said that, an idea popped in my head. I was curious. Gary Hoey is one of these guys that he's been doing the Christmas thing for many, many years. In fact, he calls it, ho ho Hoey or something like that. And he's got many Christmas albums he's released over the years. Is that something that you would ever kind of toy with, like, hey, maybe we should do a kind of rock and blues Christmas album or something like that?
it's probably not,
Yeah,
because I'm very it's weird. It's really weird being in like this kind of band or this kind of
yeah.
musical style, because a lot of people are trying to figure out where to put me and say, are you one of these blues guys? And then they listen to the album and they're like, I guess not. And then it's definitely not metal, but it's this strange combination of things. And I don't
See,
think,
that's the thing with the Jeremy Edge project. I don't think anybody can really pigeonhole you and say you're this. I will say it's a lot closer to the blues than what you were doing before. But
yeah,
but see, that's the thing. It's not a total blues album. I mean, it's got a lot of rock influence in it too.
yeah. So it's like I came to reconcile that the people who are like the very blues purists and have kind of like these little cliques of groups where they support the continuation of the blues are probably never going to dig my stuff because it's just not rootsy enough.
And see, the interesting thing, like I was curious, the people who followed you, like from since Candlelight Red and more metal oriented stuff. Um, have you been like, what kind of reaction have you been getting from those fans? Have they been digging it, or is it kind of a
Most of it's positive, but you got the hardcore metal guys are probably kind of just like, well, I'm not into that. But
yeah? The only thing I tell people like that is you got to open your ears. Like I will say, people again, you can like whatever you want to like, but like before you go and say you don't like something, at least maybe listen to one or two songs and
yeah, I mean, for me, if somebody likes, say, let's say they like Five Finger Death Punch, well, they probably like Led Zeppelin too.
yeah,
So Led Zeppelin, you would probably like this record. Because I probably, had this in mind, this being more like Led Zeppelin physical graffiti than it
sure.
would be, say, like a BB King record or even, Albert King or
And people are real honest. Like Led Zeppelin was even influenced by the blues.
and some of the blues stuff to me, like, if you've ever heard like with Luther Allison's album, Bad News Is Coming, I'm like, I listen to that and I'm like, man, this just in ways this is heavier than what's on rock radio.
I mean,
And so
people got to be honest. If you go back and look at the history of music in general, um, blues is probably the oldest form of music. I mean, if you want to get to talk about metal and rock and stuff, um,
oh,
that even what came before that was like Elvis and Muddy Waters, BB King, and all that stuff.
if you go back even further than that, you had Leadbelly wrote, House of the Rising Sun
Sure.
basically around the turn of the century. And then a few years later, like Blind Willie Johnson wrote, I think he was the first one to do basically the song that became
Yeah.
When the Levee Breaks, either Nobody's Fault But Mine. It was
There
different
you go.
lyrics.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin did a lot of Blind Willie Johnson. That music was what, from the 20s,
Well, yeah. Like I forget who originally did it, but Aerosmith's got this other song called it's a real blues-based song, Big 10-inch record off of Toys in the Attic, and that's an old blues tune from the like I think early it goes all the way back to the 50s.
Yeah, yeah. And they did I always thought Train Kept It Rolling was their song, and then I went back and like, oh, it's
Jeff
Yardbirds.
Beck. Yeah.
Jeff Beck and the Yardbirds. That's
In fact, I don't know if you know, but on Aerosmith's version, I think Jeff Beck does a guitar solo on there. I was
oh,
reading.
I did not know that. I got to go back and listen. But
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And being
cool.
that mentioned Jeff Beck, were you at all influenced by him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's we talk about Strat players, Richie Blackmore and Jeff Beck were big. It's like if I'm holding a Gibson, I play differently. If I play a Fender Strat, I kind of want to gravitate towards the whammy bar, but I don't think of it as like the '80s dive bomb thing. I like touch it and kind of give it little things that, much in the way Richie Blackmore or Jeff Beck would do.
Well, see, even Richie Blackmore, people, because he plays a lot of heavy stuff, but he was really influenced, from what I understand, by a lot of the neoclassical stuff.
Oh yeah, definitely classical stuff. Middle Eastern music, Gypsy music, Celtic music. There's all kinds of stuff.
Again, funny story with Richie Blackmore is I got to be honest, like a lot of people for years, I heard he's doing this thing with his wife Blackmore's Night, and
Mhm.
and it sounded nothing like Deep Purple and Rainbow. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't think I really want to hear that, but I'll tell you a funny story. His publicist had sent me a CD that they put out a couple years ago, and I thought, he said, would you mind doing a review? And I thought, you know what, I'll at least give this a listen, sure. And I'll admit it wasn't Deep Purple or Rainbow or anything at all like that, but for what it was, I thought, okay, this is different, but this is quite, it's not. I probably wouldn't go out and buy the whole catalog of music, but it's not bad. It's just different, and I think again, if you take the time to open your ears and listen to something, you might pleasantly be surprised.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I dig a lot of this stuff. I'm not so much into the Blackmore's Night thing, but it's cool.
Yeah, and see again, Richie has made his fortune, so he's a place in life where he can do whatever the f he wants.
He's having fun doing, which for me, I'm having fun doing this stuff. And like I said, it's weird being in not really having a niche to call your own, because people are kind of like, you're a blues band, and I'm like, yeah, but I bring a
And it
much.
almost sounds like from what you're saying that you're into doing metal music and stuff like that and hard rock, but would you say that was more
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the right word, forced, whereas like doing the Jeremy Edge project is more your natural thing?
Yeah, I mean, probably in the way, but I mean, there was always bands that I really liked that were heavy. Like when
Yeah.
Korn came out, I thought they were phenomenal. Always loved the band Helmets. I thought their stuff was cool. And there was influences of that stuff in what I did. And I always tried to do stuff that I found interesting on guitar. Um, but yeah, and I think, it wasn't necessarily like band members, people. I mean, a lot of it was industry. Like back when, if you're in your 20s
Yeah.
in the 2000s, you want to get a record deal, you want to be on Ozfest, you want to be on the radio, and people are telling you, oh, well, you can't play guitar solos if you want to do that. You
Yeah,
can't.
talking about that stuff in the '90s, I just never understood that. I mean, it was a different time, I agree, but like I remember hearing all these bands saying, well, we don't do guitar solo. I'm like, why the hell not?
And sometimes they couldn't, and sometimes it was like what we had going on for us was, this is kind of what you need to be
Yeah.
successful. And
Well, being
and
a yeah,
I'm older and wiser, I know that that's not true, that it's okay to have people like, I didn't realize, like, if you have somebody listen to your record and they're like, it's good, but what the hell are you doing?
yeah.
That's kind of a good thing, because if they don't know where to put you, or it means that you're
Well,
not.
see, that's the thing. Like with the Jeremy Edge project, is I think anybody that puts it on, listens to it, can get down with it. I mean, I don't think they're going to put it on and say, "What the hell is this?" I think, and the interesting thing is, I think because of what you're doing with the Jeremy Edge project, I think it gives you guys the ability to go out with a lot of different types of bands.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think we would almost be at home in front of a country band, a classic rock band, or even
Yeah.
like newer blues artists like
And
Marcus.
I think what you're doing now, there's a lot more of a crossover appeal. You know, like you said, you could maybe open for a country band even,
Yeah.
and you know, the country fans that might not typically listen to something like this, oh wow, this is quite impressive. This isn't bad.
Oh no, definitely. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
and
all
so
in
you know,
the
and so when you guys were when you were recording this, like were these songs like all recorded like during the same time, or most of them during the pandemic, like you said? Like,
Yeah, there was two sessions that were about 7 months apart because, and I hadn't finished the first sessions, and I went to the guys. I said I want to record drums and basic tracks for more songs, and they were kind of like, "Are you crazy?" And then they heard the songs and were like, "Okay, let's do it." And then we whipped that out, and it just took, basic tracks always takes not very long, but recording guitars and vocals and mix down, all that is, quite the
by
process.
the time you guys get in the studio, do you already have the songs uh, written, or do you kind of write them as you go and jam them out in the studio?
I try now. I kind of have them written. When
Yeah,
we did like the Candlelight Red and Backstreet Law era stuff, it was very riff oriented, which I still am riff oriented,
yeah,
but we would try to put together, 4 or 5 minutes of music that seemed to make sense, and then we would go put vocals on it. And sometimes it came out great, and sometimes it was kind of like you had to rework the whole thing to make it work. This
yeah.
stuff, a lot of it, I started out with a basic idea or a chord progression and some lyrics, and maybe even hashed it out with an acoustic guitar, and then
Yeah.
put in the rest.
And this may be a funny question, but well, like when you were recording, since they're two separate kind of recording sessions, did you find that like all the songs, for example, and you know, recording session number one, did they all kind of seem like they belonged on the same album, or did they all seem kind of just to flow?
No, and they're actually not. They're actually scattered. It really, because it is that much variance. I mean, we even did. I mean, there's even a song called Marie that is basically gypsy swing.
Wow.
It's Django Reinhardt's gypsy swing.
Yeah, yeah.
I know people have got to listen to that and go, "What? Where did this come from?" But lyrically, it fits in. In
With
mood
everything, yeah.
vibe, it fits in with everything else.
And then I guess the last thing I want to ask about is the current video and single is what is it? Coral Castle. You want to talk a little bit about that? That's I love the video.
Cool. I had the idea for this song years ago. I had that little first riff, which is this basically A suspended second to E suspended second. And I always liked that vibe. And I kind of wrote a song around that. And I wanted to be very kind of R&B
Yeah,
thing.
definitely.
Almost like a Sade's Sweetest Taboo type vibe to it.
And
And
what I kind of liked about the vibe of the video was it's kind of a lot of it is just you sitting in the chair playing the guitar. And then what's interesting is that there's a little bit during the video where it kind of doesn't show your face and then it shows your face. That's kind of cool. You know, it's such a cool song, but I don't think the fact that there's some scenes in there where not seeing your face doesn't really matter. Just the guitar vibe is so cool, you know.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely a song that's very written around the guitar, although it's not like an in your face guitar song. It's very lush and very
And
so
I gotta say, your singing is really it's really great on this. I mean,
I
I was
appreciate it.
quite surprised to find out when I talked to you the last time that you're not a naturally born lead singer, but you kind of had to work it. Like, well, he's really done his work here.
Yeah, I think it has to do with like I don't have a lot of experience singing, but I have a lot of experience listening, so I know what I want to hear.
And I
You
think
know,
maybe because you wrote the songs as opposed to writing songs that were read by somebody else, that
yeah,
maybe you can sing them more from heart. You know, it means something more to you.
yeah, I do think it does mean more when you have the person telling the story is the guy that actually wrote the story or experienced the story, and I
And
think
see
there,
that's the
yeah,
thing too, Jeremy. I think listening to these songs, I just it's they're all really well written songs, and I think the songwriting throughout both volumes of the album are is really strong. And that's the thing. Anybody who's going to listen to any of these songs from top to bottom, volume one or volume two, um, pretty great storytelling. And when I listen to songs, that's what I like. You know.
yeah, me too. I mean, there are bands that are kind of, well, the lyrics don't matter, but for me, I feel like a song needs to tell a good story, whether part of it's fiction or if it's real or if it's a mixture of
Yeah,
both.
but, yeah, that's why you look at the history of rock music, even though like that's why 40, 50 years later we're still listening to the Beatles, we're still listening, to the Eagles and Rod Stewart. Those are the songs being played on the radio because I mean the lyrics tell a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then talking about the Beatles, I'll just say this. I mean, I think they're probably one of the. I think everybody will agree one of the ultimate like songwriting teams. You know what I mean? Because probably as metal as the Beatles ever got would be like Helter Skelter. A lot of people listening to this think Helter Skelter is a Motley Crue song. No, the Beatles did it originally.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm singing more, I realize that Paul McCartney is like an exceptional singer
Yeah.
and get enough praise, I don't think.
I mean, and that's the thing. You take a guy that can do something like almost full blown on metal with Helter Skelter, and then do a beautiful ballad like "Let It Be." I mean, again,
Or
two
the
polar
long and
opposites.
winding road
Yeah,
to get back to Eleanor
and
Rigby
see,
to
that's the thing. And then he didn't just have hit songs with the Beatles. When he went solo and Wings and all that, he still continued to have hits.
and he could sing like a bird, he could scream and yell, whatever you need to do,
By the way, he played the bass pretty well too.
yeah, yeah, that's or played everything well. Have you seen the Beatles Disney documentary that came out last year?
I seen some. I got to finish watching it, but yeah, it's pretty good
No,
stuff.
it's took me a couple of days. So parts of it are very boring.
Yeah,
If you're in the music or you've been in a band, it's amazing to sit how and see how they work together and
yeah, yeah.
on.
I think, and we'll end the interview on this because I just heard recently. What I'm kind of eagerly anticipating is I heard that the Rolling Stones are recording a new album. Apparently, they're going to do a track or two
I
with
saw
Ringo and Paul. And I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. Finally,
that is really really cool. That it's cool that Ringo and Paul are working together. So when I watched that documentary, what I was impressed with the dynamic is that Ringo was like almost like the MVP, although he's the guy in the background, because he would off screen he would be like the band's therapist
what's
on.
funny about Ringo is people don't realize, he's I think him and Paul are like over 80 years old. They're still out there doing it, and a lot of people think Ringo Starr is the original drummer. Apparently, there's another drummer before him, but he's been drummer in the band the longest.
The thing that got me watching them is he would just, as those guys were doing song ideas, he would just sit there, total silence, and just watch. And
Yeah,
then at the right moment, he'd be like, "Okay, I know what to play," and he'd start playing, and he would play the perfect thing.
wow.
It wasn't like some Neil Peart crazy thing, but it was the exact perfect thing that the song needs. And I
Yeah,
feel like every drummer should
amazing.
watch that whole thing.
I think so.
It just to learn that from Ringo Starr, even if you still want to do the double bass and you want
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do just the whole have that whole thing where you're not concentrating on you're watching the songwriters and you're saying, okay, I want to hear what to play, and then play the perfect thing
there you
and
go.
that and have the perfect groove and the perfect vibe. That's that's amazing.
Well, Jeremy, I'd like to thank you taking time out of your busy schedule to do this for me again. I always enjoy talking to you. The interview we just did is probably be up in about a week. I'll let you know as soon as it gets posted. Feel free to share it. Um, and please, as you release more songs, we'll do this again. Thanks, my friend.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having us.
Okay, bye bye. Take care.